For those of you that don't know me, I'm Grooved Slick. And for those of you that do know me, I'm still Grooved Slick. I've been on iRacing for about 10 years now, and I've been racing the Porsche Cup Series for the past few seasons. This mimics the Real World Series that has produced some of the best GT drivers in the world, and in iRacing, the same holds true. This is because the car is so challenging to drive that it forces you to perfect your inputs and really understand what's happening with the car. There's no ABS and there's no traction control, so that means every one of your inputs is so much more valuable. This is great for learning how to properly drive a race car, but can also be incredibly frustrating.
Shit. Oh my god.
But I do promise that when you get it right, it is the most satisfying feeling in the world.
Oh! No!
So, to help us all expedite this learning process, I'll be using onboard video and telemetry from guest drivers and myself to compare driving styles and techniques. This analysis will help us all to better understand how to extract more performance from our Porsche Cup car, and then hopefully we'll be able to use this new skill set we've gained with the Porsche Cup car and transfer it to other cars as well. This week we'll take a trip to the 24 Hours of Le Mans circuit, located in France, where we'll use the high-speed Porsche curve section, primarily the first right-hander and second left-hander, to better understand car balance in high-speed corners, primarily on entry and mid-corner. But before we get down and dirty analyzing the data, it's important to first understand what's happening dynamically with the car. Now, let's look at the Porsche Cup car from above, and we'll draw a black line that resembles the trajectory of the car, or the path that the car is following along. As we turn the steering wheel, the car obviously turns, and the trajectory turns into an arc. If we're normally driving a car along the road, we expect that we turn the wheel more, and the car turns more. However, this only works up to a point. As you all know, you get to a certain point where you turn the steering wheel more, and the car does not turn more. You're overworking the front tires, and they begin to slide. In this case, the car does not have enough grip to turn as much as you want it to, hence understeer. A telltale sign of understeer is if you're able to turn your steering wheel more, and yet the trajectory of the car remains the same. Now we'll draw a black line that's tangent to our car trajectory. And then we'll draw a dotted red line that indicates the center line of our car. When your cornering in the center line of the car does not match up with the tangent line of the arc you're traveling on, this is known as oversteer. And you can see this angle is known as the yaw of the car. In this case, the rear tires have been overworked, and they are giving up grip. So with understeer, the front tires are giving up grip. With oversteer, the rear tires are giving up grip. However, mid-corner, it's usually ideal to have a small amount of oversteer, just a couple degrees or two of yaw. This will mean that you're stressing both your front and rear tires, however, they are not sliding enough for you to lose grip. In order to control that yaw angle at the apex, we can use our throttle and brake to control the pitch of the car. We can see that as we decelerate, the front of the car loads up, and the more load we have in the front tires, the more grip they have. Similarly, if we look at the rear of the car, it lifts up or unloads. Therefore, by changing how much we decelerate into the corner, we can change how much grip each corner of the car has, and therefore how much yaw we will have at the apex. So, now that we're all on the same page about what under and oversteer is and how you induce it, let's compare mine and the guest driver's run through the Porsche curves with all this at the front of our mind. Okay, now let's look at some onboard video. This is from my practice session at Le Mans, going through the Porsche curves, and this is the first right-hander we were talking about. You see I'm trail braking a bit, we're getting that weight forward over the nose of the car, turning in, the car is staying pretty neutral. You see my hands aren't unwinding, so we're not getting quite as much yaw as I might want. It's pretty neutral, but definitely not too much understeer through there. So now let's compare that to footage from our guest. We can see, first of all, he's taking a bit of a narrower line than I do into the corner, but that's okay. We're not really worried about too much about line. Nice trail braking, good job on the brakes. Gets the car entered, and then just right here, this is what I want to talk about. I'm going to stop it here. This is one of the most classic mistakes you can make mid-corner, where the front end of the car isn't biting as much as you want it to, and you start to crank that wheel. So if we go back to the diagram I showed, basically the telltale sign of understeer is if you're turning the steering wheel more and the car isn't turning more. And that's exactly what happens here. We'll wind it back a bit and rewatch what happens here. Gets on the brakes, a nice turn in, and as soon as he comes off the brakes, that front end grip goes away, and we get the understeer state where he cranks the wheel. So what's happening here is he wants there to be more front grip, he wants that car to turn more, so he turns the steering wheel more, and yet all that is doing is overworking the front tires and actually giving him less grip in the future. The good news is, there are enough corners in the Porsche curves that if you make a mistake early on, you have time to redeem yourself later on in your run. And that's exactly what our guest driver does here. So he gets a really nice run on entry here. Off the throttle maybe a bit early, we'll talk about that in a bit. But then uses the brake really nicely. He has it fresh in his mind. They didn't get enough rotation in the previous part of the Porsche curves, so gets on that brake a bit, gets the weight transferred to the front, and we'll see the steering wheel goes from maybe about 15 degrees to actually a little bit of oversteer, a little bit of correction because that brake shifted the weight forward. But a nice save there, holds on to it, and keeps going. So that was a really nice contrast to what happened previously, where he got that understeer and kind of cranked the steering wheel this time, felt a bit of that understeer, felt the car wasn't turning as much, and just applied a little bit of that brake right before the apex, and that allowed him to rotate the car a bit more, get a bit more yaw. Again, maybe slightly too much, but a really nice correction, and shows that he's thinking about it the right way. So now we'll compare my run. We'll see both get really nice entries, entering at the same point, but at this point he had lifted fully off the throttle, and I keep that throttle on more. And the way I like to think about this is I want as much energy going into that apex as I can, so when I do make that lift off and I do rotate the weight forward, I have more energy to put in the front tires. So that's what this allows me to do. So I take a bit more speed in, and then you see here I have my initial lift off, and I'm not using the brake, just by lifting off the throttle it gets the car to rotate, and you see I have that small correction of steering. I'll go back and show that really quickly again. So lift off the throttle here, and you see that steering just opens my hands up a bit, brings my hands back to center. That shows the car is rotating, but maybe not an over rotation. Being able to take that extra energy into the apex allows you, I don't have to actually hit the brakes here. I can just turn the car in, lift off the throttle, get the lift off to get the car to turn, and that's all I really need. I don't need as much energy as the guest driver did. But either way, it was really nice to see that kind of that learning process happening, and them recognizing that they had that understeer, they were cranking the steering wheel, and they just corrected by applying a little bit of brake. When you're new to this car, that's the calculus you need to be doing in your head, is when am I turning the steering wheel too much? Do I have that telltale understeer sign of my steering going too far? And then am I able to correct for that? Am I able to take more energy into the apex? Can I lift off the throttle and get the car to turn? Can I apply the brake slightly to get the car to turn? Or maybe I can do some setup things. We'll talk about that later. But I did promise, I did promise some data. Here is the data comparing our two runs through the Porsche curves. I thought it would just complicate things more this time, but I promise in the next one I will include some data, and we will talk data, we will talk some shop, we will talk throttle, brake traces, steering traces, all of that fun stuff. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I intend for this to become a more regular thing where we all can kind of get together and talk about different techniques we have for driving this car. I would love to see in the comments below what sort of things you noticed in this video with the throttle and brake traces, maybe what you noticed about my driving that I can improve as well. I'd love to hear any of that, and maybe some things that you would like to hear about in the future. I'd love to talk about more of that and get an idea for what you all think would be helpful to learn, or discuss, or teach me. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.